The world is going through changes. Changes happening at a speed that we have never seen before. This is leading to disruption, chaos, panic, fear, hysteria, and a turbulent economy and marketplace. How do you protect your wealth in a turbulent world? How do you invest for cash flow in alternative assets to escape the rat race in times of uncertainty? How do you decentralize yourself, your family, your community, your business, and your investments to become sovereign and escape the matrix? If you are looking for strategies, tactics, and techniques to escape the rat race and matrix, you are in the right place. My name is MC Lobsher, and this is Cashflow Ninja. This is Cashflow Ninja. I'm MC Lobsher. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode and spending your most valuable resource, your time, once again with me. Everything Cashflow Ninja is at cashflowninja.com. It's cashflowninja.com. Podcasts, books, reports, webinars, and more. And if you want to sign up for the #1 newsletter that's going out weekly in the alternative wealth strategy and alternative asset investing space, the Wealth Dojo, you could go to cashflowninja.com/subscribe and sign up for the newsletter. I've got a fantastic show for you today. I'm joined by Mary Hart. Mary, it's great to see you.
Well, hi. Thanks for having me. Nice to see you again as well.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this conversation. So I had a great time meeting you at one of the events and enjoyed our conversation. And I couldn't wait to share some of the things and insights and knowledge that you have with my listeners and my viewers. So appreciate you coming on. For our listeners and viewers that's not familiar with Mary Hart, who you are and what you get up to these days, can you please share a little bit about your background and journey and what you get up to these days?
Sure. So I am a licensed attorney, but retired from practicing law. I ran a firm in Asheville, North Carolina for many years and practiced for many years before that. I'm a real estate investor, so I have commercial properties and vacation rental properties, farmland, and some other things like that. I'm a private lender, so I do a lot of private lending to flippers. I'm hopefully getting ready to get into a storage investment deal. I'm analyzing that right now. And I teach around the country to mostly real estate investors, small business owners, and professionals, everything from estate planning to asset protection planning. What we're going to talk about today, the Corporate Transparency Act, and then just various real estate investing topics. So that's me.
Fantastic. And yeah, you mentioned the Corporate Transparency Act. This is one of the probably the most important topics I think that people are not talking about at all. Because even in the alternative wealth strategy world, in the alternative asset investing world, we're very focused on playing offense and talking about very interesting strategies and investments and deals and so forth. But this is the type of stuff that should be front and center of every single business owner and investor. So for people that are not familiar with the Corporate Transparency Act, can you just share what that is and
Sure.
When did this come into play into our world?
Yeah. So the Corporate Transparency Act is something that a law that was passed, I believe, in 2021, but it did not become effective until 2024, January 1st of 2024. And it is basically a law that's put forth by FinCEN, which is the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network that is part of the U.S. Department of Treasury. And the purpose of this law is to basically find out who all the individuals are that own all the small businesses in our country. And it's going to affect roughly 32 million small businesses. They're assuming that's the number they're looking at. And what it does, and we'll get into the weeds on it, I'm sure, but it basically requires companies to report information not only about the company itself, but about certain owners of the companies and certain people who have some level of control over the companies. When I say companies, it's everything from corporations, regardless of whether it's a C Corp or an S Corp, LLCs, certain trusts. So it's going to affect anybody who does business through an entity. Delaware Statutory Trust, for instance, it's essentially any entity that is created with a filing with the Secretary of State is what we call a reporting company. And their owners and basically people who are in control, their information has to be reported. And we'll talk more about that. But it's a huge law. It's very, in my humble opinion, very overreaching in the amount of information it is going to get. And the biggest problem is not only the invasive information that has to be reported, but it's also the penalties if you don't comply. It's a felony, potentially, with up to 2 years imprisonment, up to a $10,000 criminal penalty, and probably the one that will catch more people is a $500 a day per entity per day penalty. So for me, I've got, say, 16 entities. That's $8,000 a day every day I fail to comply. And there are deadlines, and we could talk about all that. But that's the general overview, as the government is trying to keep shell companies and nefarious groups from being able to operate in the United States. And so they're trying to have a database where people who own or control businesses in our country have all their personal information listed. So, not fun.
Yeah, I have shared on the show before how there's a war on small business. There's been an ongoing war now, I would probably say 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
And it's been fought on different fronts, but it really went into overdrive in 2020. And I think this is another attack vector in this war on small businesses in the United States. To just basically paint the picture for folks, can you go into what type of information? Because you've stated if you're a business owner, if you have an entity, whether it be a C corp, S corp, LLC, certain trusts, you have to file this. What type of information do you need to file? Because there might be people listening to this and saying, well, I've got an LLC. How much information do you want? I filled out all the docs. They have most of my information. Why is this so overreaching? Can you just dive into all the stuff that you have to basically provide?
Sure. So right now, before this law was passed, there were really two ways people got information about our business or governments. One is when you start the business and you file it with the Secretary of State's office. Of course, there's information you have to put in there when you file, and there's annual reports you have to file with the state. There's also, of course, the IRS that knows the financial side of your business, right? But it doesn't really know the details or a lot of the personal information about the owners. And so FinCEN, the U.S. Treasury, that's a whole different set of information they're collecting. And they're going to collect it basically about three categories. So one is the reporting company, which is any entity that was formed through filing with the Secretary of State or tribal governments, foreign country entities that are authorized to do business in the United States. So the reporting company, certain information has to be reported on that. And it's the company's job to file these reports, by the way. So it'll be probably senior management of the company that's going to be on the hook if the company does not file the reports. But for the company, it is things like the state in which it was created, the tax ID number, the principal place of business address, things like that for the company. Now, for each reporting company, we have to report information about anybody who's considered a beneficial owner. And that is a term of art in this law, beneficial owner. And so a beneficial owner is anybody who owns more than 25% of the entity in a wide variety of ways. I mean, it can be options, equity interest, profit sharing interest. It's very broad. But if someone owns 25% or more of the company, or they have substantial control over the management of that company, whether they're an owner or not. So a manager, a senior officer, sometimes general counsel. So it really just depends on the types of decisions they can make. So that's the second category. We've got the company, we've got the beneficial owner, and then in 2024 and after, we have the company applicant. And that is the individual who literally filed the documents with the Secretary of State to start it. That could be you, the business owner. It could be your attorney. It could be your attorney's paralegal, right? And if it was a paralegal and that person was supervised by an attorney, then the attorney is also the company applicant. So for 2024 and afterwards, any entities that are started in 2024 or afterwards, we also have that third category of company applicant. So the information that has to be reported for the owners, the beneficial owners, is very invasive. It is your full name, no middle initials. You have to do your full name. Mary Elizabeth Hart is my name, for instance. Your full name, your residential address, where you live, not a P.O. box, not your office, a residential address, some identifying document number, your passport or your driver's license with the number, the expiration date, all that, a photocopy of that identification, right? And I can't remember right off the top of my head. I don't think you have to do date of birth or social security number, but still your private home. Now, this theoretically is only being disclosed to the Department of Treasury and to certain financial institutions and law enforcement, right? Like banking and law enforcement if they're trying to find someone. But we all know how things get hacked, right? So that information is probably not going to be as safe as we would hope it would be. And so we in this business are saying, you guys, we all need to get identity theft insurance if you don't already have it. Because it's now you're going to have your full name, a copy of your passport or driver's license, your home address, and think about the stalkers out there. Some stalker got hold of this and now knows where their victim lives. So it's very overreaching in my opinion. With the company applicant, if it's they have to be individuals, like the attorney and paralegal example, they do not have to provide their home address. They can do their office address, but otherwise it's the same information. And I'll tell you the deadlines for filing this form first, and then when you might have to update. So for any entity that was in existence before January 1st of 2024, so something that was started in 2023 or before, you have to file what's called a beneficial ownership information report, a BOI report, by the end of this year. Okay, so by December 31st. Now, if your company was started in the year 2024, you only have 90 days after it was started to file this paperwork. Now, if you started in 2025 or after, you're only going to have 30 days to file your initial report. Ridiculously short. So again, entities 2023 or before that were created in 2023 or before, you have through the end of this year, December 31st, 2024, to file. Entities created in 2024, you have 90 days from the date you filed that LLC or corporation. And in 2025 or after, you only have 30 days. So that's to file the initial report. If there are any updates, like somebody's address changes, you have 30 days to file an updated report. If there was a mistake in the first report, you have 30 days to correct it once you realize there's a mistake. So very tight timelines, very, very tight timelines to file these things. You can find these forms, by the way, on the FinCEN website. I think if you type in I can't remember what it is, fincen.gov, FINCEN.gov, or just Google FinCEN BOI, and it'll bring you to the FinCEN website. And there's a brochure explaining this. There are FAQs. There's a link to the actual form. Now, if it's just one company, one owner, you fill out one form, that's not that big a deal. But say, take it for me. What if I own 16 entities or something crazy like that? I've got to file 16 of those forms and I have to repeat my personal information every time. What a pain in the rear end. So you have the option, companies and individuals have the option to ask FinCEN for a unique identifying number. It's called a FinCEN identifier. And you basically, when you're requesting that, and you can do that through that same website, you give them all your personal information once or all your company information once. They issue you this unique identifier number. And now every time you have to fill out a form for an entity, instead of doing all my personal information, I'll say, here's my unique FinCEN identifier number, and all that information is already in their system. I don't have to repeat it every single time. Now, obviously, if my information changes, I change addresses, for instance, I've got to go back and change my information with FinCEN. But that should make it a little bit easier. So this is no fun.
Gotcha. No, and what it seems like is they passed this law. You have to register, and now you have to with this financial crimes division, basically, and everybody's on there. So it's almost like everybody is now a criminal, basically, or you have to prove that you're not. And if you don't adhere to this on some technicality, because I'm just thinking about regular business owners that are so busy just running their day-to-day business, working in and on the business, and just staying up with all of the regulatory stuff. I'm just thinking of some of my businesses too. It's nuts just to stay ahead of all the regulatory changes. Some states, it's almost impossible to do business in. I think most people listening to this
most people haven't heard of this. I teach this all around the country, and people, the first time you heard it from me, people are like, what the heck is this? I've never heard of this. Why isn't this in the news? It may be buried on page 10, but anyway, most people don't know about it. And so a lot of people will be caught off guard. And theoretically, there is no safe harbor where you could say, ooh, I just forgot, or I didn't know. It's kind of a black or white $500 a day penalty. My tinfoil hat side says this is actually a revenue raising grab, that they expect people not to know about it, and they expect to go grab a lot of revenue and penalties. Now that's just me speculating with my tinfoil hat.
No. I agree with you, and I put on a tinfoil sombrero from time to time, not just a hat. And I look at this, to your point too. Number one, you're trying to create create felons. Basically, you're trying to create criminals.
You're going to have
what this law is trying.
A bunch of accidental felons,
right? You're looking at. Right. You're looking in the intention is, okay, let's force people to do stuff. And then on technicalities, it's a revenue raising one. And now people can, again, like you said, in the worst case scenario, go sit in prison. I mean, $500 a day per entity. There's a lot of people listening to this that just, as in my case, they have a ton of entities that they're involved with in businesses. So this is going to be very interesting. I think a lot of people are going to get caught off guard, and they're going to be shocked next year in January, 30 days into it, when people start sending letters out to them. Because that's the other thing that I'm thinking about too. And again, this is tinfoil my sombrero, looking out from that view, is they already know where most of the businesses are. Like you said, you've already registered it with the state that you're operating in, and with the IRS. So they know that. So they're just going to cross-reference all of their files and then start, finding people that didn't comply with this, I think, as early as January next year.
Yeah. And I've had some people in my audiences say, well, I'm just not going to do it. I'm like, well, I'm going to do it because orange doesn't look good on me, and I'm not going to federal prison. I'm not going to be the orange is the new black type of person, I'm just not going to do it. So I'm waiting. However, I'm probably going to file mine in July or August. And why am I waiting? I'm waiting because this system was brand spanking new in January, and I'm waiting for them to work out kinks. And I don't want to wait till the end of the year, because all the people who have procrastinated will crash the system at the end of the year. So I'm trying to do it sometime around July or August, maybe September. The other reason I'm waiting is we've already had one case out of the Northern District of Alabama that found this law unconstitutional in the way it was essentially put together and what they're requiring, that things should have been left to the state, not the federal government. However, that law, people want to hang their hat on that law and say, well, it's unconstitutional, I don't have to do it. That is not true, because that law only applies to the plaintiffs in that case, which were certain named plaintiffs and the National Small Business Association. So it applies to those plaintiffs, and only the members of the National Small Business Association that were members as of the date of the decision, which was March something, 16th or 30th. I can't remember the date. Sometime last March, just a few months ago. So it is still the law in everywhere but, Northern District of Alabama for that very small class of people. Will there be other challenges? Probably. I have not checked to see whether the federal government appealed that case, but I do know on the FinCEN website, they specifically said, hey, this only applies to that one case, and we're not, we're still coming, we still expect all these forms to be filed by everybody else. So they have put that on their website. The other thing I will say, I'm glad they did this on their website, is they have put a big alert to watch out for frauds and scams, because of course, with all the bad actors in the world, people are sending out letters or emails or something pretending that they are FinCEN or asking for your beneficial ownership information and telling you to scan like a QR code or follow some URL link. And that is completely fraudulent. The FinCEN will not send you anything. This is on you to go out and find the form and report yourself. Do not fall for any scam emails asking for information.
Yeah. Yeah, I've already received a bunch of emails in my inbox regarding this, to your point. So this has created now a window of opportunity for scammers and fraudsters. How do you achieve clarity, certainty, and predictability in a world, economy, and markets that are volatile and chaotic? How do you have confidence in an environment where change and disruption is constant? Setting up infinite banking is how you establish certainty in an uncertain world, predictability in an unpredictable world. With an infinite banking policy, you have your capital warehoused outside of the Wall Street casino, where it is guaranteed never to go down in value and guaranteed to grow tax-free. You have guaranteed access to your capital, and you also will be able to access your capital tax-free to use to capitalize on opportunities as you come across them. Creating your own banking system with infinite banking can be your secret weapon to protect and grow wealth during turbulent times. You can watch a presentation and explore infinite banking options for you and your family at yourownbankingsystem.com. That's yourownbankingsystem.com. The other thing too is who can file this for you, because there's, you could have an attorney, you could have a bunch of other people file this for you as well.
Well, anybody can file it for you, but the person who's responsible for filing is the reporting company, which of course has got to be run by somebody. So senior management would probably be the one on the hook, senior owners, if it didn't get filed. And I think that if someone else files it for you, like your attorney or your CPA, first of all, a lot of firms are not doing it because they're afraid of the liability. Because think about it, is some great grandchild who's just turned 18 and is considered a beneficial owner got a 1/18% interest, they've got to be reported, right? So there's a lot of potential research that these third parties like lawyers and CPAs would have to do to make sure that they're catching everybody. So some firms are just not going to do it at all. Other firms will probably do it, but they're probably going to charge a significant amount of information, because it's not like just take a form and 10 minutes, fill it out like the articles of organization or something. They have to really research and know exactly who all the players are, and they've got to get information. And sometimes, by the way, people who need to report information are not going to be willing to give their information, which is something else you can be penalized for. You can be penalized by FinCEN if you don't file the report. You can be penalized if you give wrong information. You can be penalized if you refuse to give the responsible people the information they need to file it. So, I'm assuming that third parties, some of them are not going to want to go through the headache of chasing people for information. So it's not that only certain people can file it, but the company has the responsibility to file it. Now they can delegate, and some of those third parties will do it, some won't, and the ones that do it, I expect it to be expensive.
This is, again, I would say this should be something that is a top priority for everyone. And this isn't something also that I would recommend folks go and say, well, I'm just not doing it and not cooperating, because I could see really the hammer coming down on this next year as a
and pay. I mean, if 365 days a year, $500 a day, what's that? 180 some $1,000 in penalties per entity per year that you don't file? That's a lot, right? And I was going to say something else about this too, but it just went out of my head. But yes, I would not. I think everybody should take this very, very, very seriously, because their reach is long and it is expensive and a crime if you don't do it. So I would definitely take it seriously. And by the way, minor children are not considered beneficial owners until they reach the age of majority in the state in which the company is. Not the state in which the kid resides in, but the state where the company is. So if it's Delaware Corporation, even if the child lives in Montana, whatever the age of majority is in Delaware, once that child reaches that age of majority, they now have their information has to be reported. And I remember now what I was going to say. For all businesses going forward, certainly for any new business, but probably even existing businesses, we should all amend our bylaws or our operating agreements to require every member to cooperate with whatever information is needed to file those reports, and have some sort of penalty if the member or the shareholder does not comply. What do they do? Do they not get to vote for a while? Do their distributions get withheld? I don't know. But, for me, I can see a situation, because I've represented so many small businesses where, shareholders don't get along and somebody says, well, I'm not going to do this. And you're senior management, so you're going to be the one in trouble if I don't file this report. First of all, that's not true. They'll be in trouble too. But I would definitely require it now as you bring people into your business, and maybe even amend for current owners that's a requirement to give the company that information.
In your research too, are there some trusts that are exempt from this, or do most of them fall into this category where they have to register and submit all this information too?
Good question. I would say most trusts are probably exempt, with some exceptions. So remember that a reporting company is one that is created through the filing with a Secretary of State or some similar entity like a tribal government. And so certain trusts, like Delaware Statutory Trust, for instance, Virginia Business Trust, they are created by a filing with the Secretary of State in that state. So they would automatically be reporting companies, those trusts, okay, because they were created by filing something with the Secretary of State. Now, let's say it's your garden variety land trust or your garden variety revocable living trust for estate planning. Whether or not they're considered beneficial owners or reporting companies or anything else is a little bit gray right now. We don't have a whole lot of guidance about it. But for instance, in my living trust for estate planning, my living trust, or me as the trustee of that trust, is the owner of all my little LLCs. So if my trust owns more than 25% of my LLC, now my trust, or me as the trustee, becomes a beneficial owner, and that information has to be reported. There are some lawyers who have studied this more than I, who are opining that if beneficiaries can demand withdrawals, like you can in a revocable living trust or a land trust, or they're entitled to all of the income, like you see in a living trust or a land trust, that they're also going to be considered beneficial owners for this FinCEN Corporate Transparency Act. So that's a little gray, but in what I'm going to do, if my trust is even remotely involved in owning an LLC or 25% or more, or if that trust somehow manages some business, even if it doesn't own, then I'm going to report. It's not worth the gray area to me. I'd rather just report. My information is going to be out there for everything else. I might as well just report and stay out of it.
Right, because it's going to be on all the LLCs that you filed in all the companies. So it's already, you're already in the database. So at that stage, if it's gray, I see your point to just file that too. Because there's a lot of folks listening with very complex estate planning, and they have domestic asset protection trusts and so forth, which owns LLCs and so forth. Yeah, to your point, they're going to be beneficial owners of those LLCs that's inside of those trusts, right?
Probably. And I would say what people really should do is get a definitive opinion from an attorney in their state who is familiar with this law. Like, I'm not practicing law anymore, so I don't give legal opinions anymore. So I'm not trying to sell my services because, I consult, but I don't give legal opinions. But they should talk to a CPA or a lawyer where they are and who knows their businesses and their trusts, and can tell them whether or not those trusts need to be listed as beneficial owners, or the beneficiaries need to be listed as beneficial owners.
Any final takeaways just on the Corporate Transparency Act or something that we didn't cover, Mary, that you think that people should know about?
No, I would just encourage people to go to that FinCEN website. And again, if you just Google FinCEN, FINCEN, and BOI for beneficial ownership information, you'll probably find the website. It's a government website. I just can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. And I would read the FAQs. I would read the brochure. I would make sure you look at it carefully. Because I'm not only involved in so many entities that I own, but I also manage entities for other family members. My plan, and this might be helpful to someone, is I'm actually going to create a spreadsheet for every entity I'm involved in, no matter how I'm involved. And for each of those entities on my spreadsheet, I'm going to write down exactly who the members are, their percentage of ownership, whether they have substantial control, even if they're not an owner. So in other words, I'm going to try to create a master spreadsheet to identify all the players that I need to report on. So each reporting company will have its little spreadsheet that lists every single owner, every single person who has substantial control. And then I'm going to get those people, or if it's me, get those FinCEN identifier numbers, and then I'll put those on that spreadsheet. So when I sit down to do these ownership reports for 16 entities or however many it is, I'm just going to have all that information right in front of me. And I'll just go through and do it, bada bing, bada bang, they're all done. If you haven't gathered all that information and put it in a place that's easily accessible, you're going to really not like the process. Because you're going to be hunting for information. You got to get everybody's addresses if you don't have their FinCEN number, for instance, copies of their license or passport. So anyway.
Right. That's great. That's a great tip. Mary, the other thing that I wanted to ask you too, you're a very successful investor and have created an amazing life. What are some of the things that is on top of mind for you as an investor as we're recording this? What are some of the things that you're paying attention to?
So it's actually a timely question that you asked me that, because I teach around the country and I'm part of a lot of real estate investor networks. I hear a lot of things. And so I've heard a lot lately about deals going south, either for lack of due diligence up front or failure to follow up after the deal is inked, and where people who are joint venturing in deals or partnering up in deals are in big wars, and lawsuits are probably coming and all that. And so I always want to just tell people there are very, very important things when you do any kind of deal, whether that's a private loan or buy a storage unit or flip a house, anything. There's your due diligence you do up front, and that's extremely important. You need to vet the people, the property, and then the paperwork. The paperwork is key. I've seen a number of instances lately where people don't really understand the paperwork they're signing. For instance, they might think they're doing a collateralized loan and they're really a joint venture partner. And I hate the term partner because it's not technically a partnership legally. And then the deal falls apart and they're ready to go take the property back because they've lost, a couple $1,000,000 or whatever. And they come to find out they didn't sign loan documents. There are no loan documents. They're just lost all their money. So due diligence up front. Everybody needs to pay attention to the paperwork, the people, the property, and then don't stop there. If you're the silent partner, quote unquote, in a deal, you're just the money person, don't just count on the other person doing their job. Ask for information, get transparency, look at the books, make sure you know what's going on, that money is being allocated where it's supposed to be allocated, that receipts are being kept, that QuickBooks are being kept, or whatever, because I'm seeing a lot of things that are not going well for people as the economy gets worse. And Warren Buffett said, you see who's been swimming naked when the tide goes out, right? Well, we're about to see some tides going out. I think we're starting to see that happen, kind of like we did in 2008. And so how do you prevent that? Excellent due diligence up front and excellent follow through. Don't just count on somebody else doing your job, even if you're not the boots on the ground person. Pay attention.
That's great advice. And it's interesting that you say that at the end. I would say, like, it almost feels like we hit the top at the end of 2022. And then we started to get sharp interest rate moves. And
Yeah.
then it seems that that's kind of where things have started to go down from there. And
Yeah.
we're now seeing a lot of deals come apart at the seams and a lot of stuff, go down, go bad. A lot of deals go bad, right? So it's a pretty interesting stage that we're at this. It's taken a while. I almost felt that we were there in 2019, and then we had the influx of capital, what, 4 trillion into
Yeah.
the economy in 2020 with the events of
Sure.
March of 2020, which just delayed all this stuff, pushed it 2 years
Yep.
forward, and I feel like it's starting to finally come apart at the seams. Commercial real estate.
Oh yeah.
Into more multifamily deals, into other types of commercial real estate, right?
Definitely. And I would say one other thing. Just because someone, you very generously called me a successful real estate investor, and I am, but just because someone is out there and they look like they've got all their stuff together and they've been doing this for a million years, doesn't mean you don't need to do due diligence on them just like anybody else, just like somebody you've never heard of. Do not change your due diligence because someone is famous or someone has been doing it for 20 years or anything else. It's the basics every single time. Don't, just every single time.
One question I do ask every single person that's been on this, just on my show the first time. We talk a lot about business, we talk about investing, we talk about cash flow. But one of the things that we talk about too is legacy and living and leaving a legacy.
Yes.
So I always ask my first time guests, if you cannot pass on any money to future generations, and you're only allowed to pass on 3 principles or values to them to help them achieve success and happiness and build wealth, what would they be?
Okay, that's a very good question. And I actually gave a whole keynote speech on legacy at another event a couple of years ago. And I based that on my stepfather, who's now deceased, but he and my grandmother really gave me great lessons in legacy that were about wealth building, but also way beyond wealth building. Let me see if I can think exactly how I said it. I won't remember how I said it exactly. But first of all, your integrity is something no one can take away from you. But if you give it away, it's very hard to get back. So I don't know if I've only got 3 things. I've got more than 3. But anyway, keep your integrity no matter what. Your integrity should be protected at all costs, because once you lose your reputation, your wealth building capability gets a lot harder, because you can't find people to do deals with you if you've lost your reputation and your integrity. Always treat the janitor and the president the same. Don't change your personality by what you think somebody can get to you or give you. Every human being is deserving of the same amount of respect, even if they think differently than you or feel differently than you or look differently than you. So respect your fellow human beings. Those really go to character. In terms of wealth, obviously, I think there's a life cycle of wealth that everybody needs to pay attention to, whether they're going to leave wealth to their children or not, or anybody else. But live within or below your means. Always seek to grow your wealth and grow it in a way that's protected from creditors and protected from taxes, because not what you make, it's what you keep. And then decide, as your children or whoever your beneficiaries are, as you get closer to the end of your life, decide, do I really want them to have all this wealth, or do I want it to go to charity, or some combination? So my parents, with my encouragement, left a huge chunk of their estate to a community foundation. And then I got them to then divide that up. There were 6 kids. Say, okay, after their death, that community foundation not only accepts a huge inheritance, but it's going to be divided into 6 shares. So each of us got our own little philanthropy fund, thanks to my parents. So it wasn't wealth that we just went and bought fancy cars, but I'm supporting YMCAs and family farms and food insecurity, people that help feed people and all that. And I did that because that was a legacy left to me by my parents. It wasn't money directly given to me, but it allowed me to be a philanthropist, which I love.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing those.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah. Yeah. Mary, this has been fantastic. Where can folks follow you? Where can they get in touch and learn more about all the many things that you're involved with?
Sure.
And just stay in touch.
Yeah. So I'm not the very best at social media or any of that. I do have a TikTok and an Instagram channel. I haven't put anything on new lately, but there's still good stuff. I think my Instagram is like at Mary Hart AIM, AIM, because I had an academy called the AIM Hire Academy. My website is Mary Hart at maryhart.net. So MARYHART.net. And I don't keep it up as well as I should because I'm too busy. I need to hire a social media person. But anyway, there's some information in there, and occasionally I throw up free resources. But they can email me at maryhart@maryhart.net. Again, I'm not practicing law. If someone really needs my skill set as a consultant to liaison with their attorney, particularly for estate planning or private lending or self-directed IRA investing, I can be hired for $600 an hour. I'm not cheap because I'm not trying to work, but that's how they'd find me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your insights and your knowledge and providing so much value for all of my listeners and my viewers.
Well, thank you for asking. It was quite the honor. I appreciate it. You have a lovely day.
And thank you so much to all of my listeners and my viewers for, again, spending the most valuable resource, your time, with me on the show. Everything Cashflow Ninja is at cashflowninja.com. And don't forget to sign up for the #1 weekly newsletter in the alternative wealth strategy and alternative asset investing space, the Wealth Dojo, at cashflowninja.com/subscribe. Until next time, live infinitely. This presentation is for educational and informational purposes only. The information being presented and considered does not consider your particular financial objectives or situation, and it does not make personalized recommendations. This material is not intended to replace the advice of a qualified tax and legal advisor or other qualified professionals, and you should not use the information in place of a customized consultation with a licensed professional regarding your specific personal financial objectives, situation, and needs. We believe the information provided is reliable, but we do not guarantee its accuracy, timeliness, or completeness.